Good. So you have that?
Yes.
Yes, I see Method Studio, so yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'll just hopefully this will play okay. I've been trying to make sure everything works. Hello, Glenn, thank you for the introduction. So I'm a visual effects supervisor. I work at a studio called Method in Melbourne, Method Studios. They're a company that are in Los Angeles and in Canada, in Vancouver, I think, Montreal, and in London. The company I work with has been around for a long time, but was bought by Method Studios. So we're now part of that team. My background is in traditional animation. I started as a cell animator, hand drawing for commercials, television commercials, and children's television. So I did that for a few years and moved into computer graphics in 1985, when it was just starting, which was very exciting, and began my role as a visual effects supervisor in 2008. To sort of describe what a visual effects supervisor does, if you imagine in our company, when we do computer graphics, we have many different roles, and from modeling to skinning to texture work to animation, lighting, compositing, there's probably 20 different stages that anything goes through. And so my role is to communicate with the directors or the show supervisors, go on set for the filming if I need to, and then bring that information back to the team. Like the conductor of an orchestra, I have to make sure that everybody is working in harmony and everything is creatively correct for the director, and then I present the work and try and make the deadline, which is always the challenge. So interestingly, this job did not exist when I was studying. So I studied traditional animation, as I said. Computer graphics didn't exist, and visual effects supervising didn't exist because there was no visual effects. And even working in film seemed impossible because I'm in Australia. I'm far away from everything. It didn't seem like it could ever happen as a job. So because of the internet and because of the technological advances, this is now, people are doing film work everywhere on the planet. Our first commercial film, our first film for America was in 2006, and that was for Charlotte's Web. That was our very first US film. And we've been working only in film since. So we don't do commercials or anything anymore. We only do feature film work, and it's only really for the US market, although we have been doing increasingly more work for China as well. So this is just some of the work that I've done personally as a supervisor. There's a bunch of titles there that some you may know, some you may not know, but that's sort of mostly what I've been doing with myself. So when we started this company, it was basically 5 of us. And now we're in Melbourne, we're at about 200 creatives. So there's 2 floors full of computer nerds and artists all making these films. Yeah, I think it's interesting to note as well that in that time, you know, we've moved from 3D Studio Max to Maya to Houdini to, you know, a whole bunch of different software to kind of get this made, and all this stuff is evolving all the time. And I think I tell people that at least 1/3 of what I do is learning, and I mean, I've been working in this business for a while now. And still every day.
Sorry, Glenn, the line dropped.
Oh, am I with you again? Am I back?
Do you hear him or not?
I do hear you.
Can you?
We're fine.
Yeah. So almost everybody's fine.
Probably me. Detmold is offline.
We lost Michelle.
So should I keep going or should I pause?
No,
you can continue, I think.
All right. Technical problems. All right. Anyway, I'll stop talking soon.
No, he's back again, Glenn.
He's back?
Yes.
Yep. All good? Okay. I don't know what you missed, but listen, I was just talking about this work. What I might do is show you some of the work we've done. I've got a show reel, and then I've got some examples of behind the scenes, and I can talk to you about some of the creative process that went into some of that. Okay. So hopefully this plays fine for you. Oh, sound.
No.
The sound dropped? You don't need sound.
Now the sound dropped.
Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me though?
Yes, we can hear you.
That's fine then. Imagine it's really cool music.
Oh, it's poor.
It's not quite as interesting. So I might as well just talk a little bit while this is playing. What's kind of interesting to me as part of my job is that you can see here the wide range of styles and the wide range of work that we have to do, from this sort of exploding Game of Thrones stuff to the Minions to SpongeBob to Ted to, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. So there we go again. So it's incredibly varied in terms of what we do. And that's part of what's really interesting about the creative process, because sometimes studios will come to us and they'll have a very, very clear idea of exactly what they want, and everything will be sorted out. And sometimes some of these people come to us and they have no clue, or they've shot a film and it hasn't worked, or it's too long, or it's too short, or the character's not working, or they've no idea what a character looks like or what an effect would look like. And we get a lot of creative control over that. So it really varies enormously. And that's really interesting. Like I've been talking to some of the guys at Pixar and saying how much I love their work. And then they sort of said back to me that they don't understand how we do what we do, which is one day we're doing something that's incredibly photographic and photoreal, and the next day we do something incredibly cartoonish. And there's really, that's probably the best thing about what we do. And every single time we work on anything, we're learning something new. You know, you're learning something about a creature or a real animal or a real object, or as you guys were saying about architecture, about the way things work. You know, we have to look at plans for sets and recreate things, and we need to acquire data and rebuild locations, and all those sorts of things are all part of what we do. What I might do is show you a couple of examples of that work and how we actually made some of that. So this is Actually, this has our old name on it. We used to be called Allura. This was the company name before we became Method. So sometimes you'll see a little bit of this. But this work on Game of Thrones, we received an Emmy Award for. So that was pretty cool. Very happy with that. But I'll start playing and I'll stop and explain little bits as we go. Actually, I'll turn the sound off for this one.
Could you try it with sound, please, Glenn? It's
With
much
this?
more fun.
Okay, I'll try the sound. I just don't expect it to work.
We
Here
just
we
all switched off our video.
Okay. So this was an example of having to create a 3,000 strong army. So you can kind of see that on an example like this, what we do, sometimes we don't have enough people. So this is as many people as they had for the show. And these people dressed up as this army and the Bolton army and stood on either side of the field. And then what we had to do was actually invent the 3,000 other people that weren't there. And that includes all the animation, all the shields, all the armor, all the costuming, and also they're in a battle. So we had to have the costuming clean, and then the costuming with mud on it, and then the costume with mud and blood, and then rips and dead horses and live horses, you know, all sorts of stuff. So it made for a lot of things, a lot of effort. And then sometimes this is another trick we do sometimes where we take the same people and we stand them here at the start here, and then we move them, and then we move them, and then we move them, and then we put them all together, and then we added extra CG characters around that. And that's how you get an army of that size. And we mix people around so you don't see the same person 2 times. And then you can see the fields in the background were wrong. So that all gets turned into the frozen hills. This is another example, small group, another small group, another small group, and then we put them all together. And this is a giant from Game of Thrones. So we shot him on a green screen and then added him in. This is an example here of some other kind of work we do. We quite often have stunt people who do the tricks, and you can see there's a rope here. So the horse only gets so far before it gets its head turned. This is very safe for the horse. They can fall safely in one angle. And we shot the actor on a green, just turning his head. And then we do this face replacement, take the rope out, and then add all the arrows. So this shot was famous. People say how amazing it was that he stood there in front of all these horses, but a lot of these horses are very far away because of the lens, and half of them are CG and half of them are real. Here's a good shot. Now in that chaos, we did a lot of investigation into horses. We had to watch a lot of horses in accidents, in steeplechase accidents, things like that, terrible to have to watch in order to animate these things correctly. And then we added a crowd system. So we animate all these elements by hand, and then we use the computer to generate randomness and generate a crowd. And then from there, we have the complexity that we need. So in this case, this gentleman here is a real man on a real horse, and this is a CG horse with a CG man. And we do this a lot too, where we have some real elements and some CG elements. So your brain can't stop and analyze which element's real, which element's computer graphics. And it's very important to keep mixing that up so that you don't spot the computer graphics too easily. So in a shot like this, you can sort of see the elements we're bringing in that are CG and the elements that are real. And then further on, when we bring the horses in, we always do this with our characters, where we have a skeletal system, we have anatomically correct muscles, and those muscles are simulated to generate fat and or muscle shapes. And then on top of that, We have a layer of skin that has a thickness, and basically that gets simulated to give us jiggle, and all those things help with the animation. And you can see there's hairs. Each horse had over 1 million hairs that we groom with a digital comb and style, and the hairs simulated on the mane and the tail. The cloth is all simulated with cloth solvers. And then we hand animate a lot of this. So you can kind of see when it all goes together. It's pretty quick, but you get the idea. So then it's about repeating these techniques over and over for the different shots that we need. And here you can see this is a simulation pass where you can see all the manes and tails all being simulated and all the cloth being simulated on all the characters. So we have departments of people who just do the effect stuff. They do mud and blood and hair and cloth and all those things that are simulated. They're separate to our animators who animate the horses and the people and all that stuff. So you can kind of see all the layers being added in. And all the mud being thrown around is all computer generated. And this choreography, we've put the horses in just so you can see them as skeletons to make it interesting. But the choreography, how this is structured, took a lot of planning, because you didn't want an actor, a 3D horse to die, and then an actor to run in that area. They had to know not to be where the CG horse was going to be, or everything had to know where everything was. And it took a lot of planning. And this is one very long shot. And so the whole lot took many months to make this. You can kind of just see how much is going on. Lots of blood. Game of Thrones. So here's an interesting little example. In this shot here, we needed to this was meant to be a person without a head, a horse and the giant was meant to be here, and he's meant to knock the horse away. Now see, this guy is carrying a long stick with a ball. That's called an eyeline tool, and that is to let everybody know where the giant is and how tall the giant is. Right, so we shot this like this, and then the next thing we did, or the filmmakers did, was they had the actor playing the giant in a scaled set. So now the camera is aligned to make him look big when we stick the two together, and he's just doing that, and then we put them all together, and then animate the horse tumbling. So there's a point where the horse is real, and then it turns to a computer-generated horse, and then it moves away. This shot, these shots were almost the most complicated, in that there's so much hand animation in here. One live action piece of the actor playing the giant that we put into their corner, but the rest of them are all CG. And all these, some real people here, and then a cast of thousands coming with them. So again, we're constantly mixing up what's real and what's computer generated. In this shot here, we needed to have these horses ride in and crack through into the center. Now, we used real people here, and then everything else is CG. And all these little people here all had to run, and they were all hand animated to run away from these horses, and they all needed to be choreographed by hand. So all that movement and all the movement of those horses is all hand animated people. So there's no tricks to that. And so that just took, months. All right, so that's just a little look of this. And a shot like this where we built Winterfell, we had to build the whole castle here. It's changed from series to series. And every time there's like an update, we have to sort of be honor the update. And this was a helicopter shot, and there was a big valley through here, and there was a train line going through here, and there was stuff in the forest like buildings, and all those things got painted out by hand. And then we rebuilt the terrain and built the bird and animated the bird flying in. So that's a little bit of Game of Thrones. And then I'll just show you something completely different. So this is the other sort of side of the coin. So Winnie the Pooh. So we worked on Christopher Robin. You can sort of see how much complexity. This is a grayscale render of Winnie the Pooh's fur. And you can also see his jumper, and every little stitch is handmade. Now, we didn't make the Winnie the Pooh because we shared this asset with a company called Frame Store, and they did some beautiful work on that. But we animated him and had to make him in our renders look exactly the same as theirs, and we had different software and different techniques, so we all had to match. Okay, so but that takes a long time itself. What's interesting here is this is when it starts to rain, and you can see we're actually simulating the rain soaking into the fur and actually making the fur stick together like it does when it rains. So you can sort of see that. You can kind of see there the little darker spots when they hit and the tiny little droplets sticking to his fur. Here's an example of a shot where he has to open a door. So it's just easier for us to build the door, build the whole environment. Here he is crossing through his tree into the real world. And you can see there's nothing here that's real. This is all CG. And including these leaves that we had to simulate. So we had to build all these little leaves and then animate them being crushed by him walking and folding as he walked into the light. And then you get a shot like this. And it's interesting how often in a film like this, you'll jump from a live shot to a completely computer graphic shot and you won't know. It's like this here, he's eating honey, and all that honey's CG. The plates, we made the plate, we made the little honey dipper. All of this is computer generated. And you can see we had some reference. We always like to get a little bit of getting a little doll and putting the doll's nose in the honey so we know what it should look like. And then we generated it on the computer. Same as this shot, all CG. So it's a very different lot of skills to Jumanji, but in some ways the same techniques, just applied differently. So this was an interesting one. This was a warehouse in Dover in England, and it's not a train station, and there was not a track or trains or anything here. So the art department built all these things, and then if you saw, you can see a crane back here. This is just it's just a big warehouse. And so what we did was, we can see we cut around all the people and anything moving, and then built a train, built a sunken platform, and built all the carriages and a fully working engine and all the smoke and steam, just to make this thing pull away, including adding CG people on the platforms. And then, I mean, it was more than that shot. There was a whole bunch of shots on that train, so it needed making. This is curious here. So Ewan McGregor is holding what we call a stuffy, and it's a little shape that he holds with some points on it, and we can track these points and use them to generate a point in space to stick to Winnie the Pooh. And it also stops him from putting his hand too close to his chest. He's holding a physical object, which is good. But the problem is, you also see it in the glass. You see it there? So we have to get rid of it in the reflections. And it's in the reflections everywhere. It's in every piece of glass. So it has to get painted out. And so we have to make the reflection as well as Winnie the Pooh, and then work out how to make all that go together. So it looks like he's carrying a live character. Here's a pedestrian bridge in England. You can see how big a person is. That's the guy flying the drone. So we have to paint all this out and invent all the trees behind, build a new bridge, put the train on it. Filmed all these little people in the car park. I got out in the car park and we made everybody pretend they were sitting on a train, and they all go in the windows and you never see them, but they're in there. So we also built Winnie the Pooh's oak tree, and you can see they've only got this much. But we had to not only build the oak tree, but put it behind all the other trees. So we had to trace every tree and leaf and get it all to sit in behind. You do this like 400 times and then you're finished. And I don't know how we're going for time, but I've got some stuff that might just talk a little to some architecture in what we do. Let me see if I can find some of that. I will actually show you one shot here from Ted. This was very proud of Ted, but I thought this shot was interesting. Seth MacFarlane, who created Ted, wanted to fly down to a house, and that house was a real house in America. And he wanted us not just to make up where that house was, to literally fly from outside the earth down to it. And then in TED 2, he wanted us to fly down to a church, to a real church in a real location. And we didn't use, you see in films when they want to fly in, they push clouds in front and then suddenly you're closer and then there's more clouds and then you're on the street. This has none of that. This is one shot. So from the Universal logo, we fly to an exact location on the earth. So we had to generate a lot of these maps. And at some point, we have to go through a series of photos. These are all nested photos and aerial photography. And then now we're into 3D. And then we fly down to the one church. You can see the traffic. And then we fly exactly to this real church. It's a real place. And then we fly all the way into the window. Now we had to obviously model all this. So we scanned the whole building and we recreated the whole environment. And then we fly right through a stained glass window that we built. That's all CG, and then straight through to the wedding. So from the Universal logo to a wedding in one shot. And you can kind of see here a little bit about some of the steps. So you can kind of see that was our scan, and then we built the city and all the foliage. And then the trick is for us, it's how do you fool the eye to thinking you're not looking at a rendering, but you're looking at reality. And that's always the thing that creates a lot of drama for us in terms of how real do these surfaces look. And a lot of the times it's damaging things and putting details on, like animating little children on swings or a little person walking, or those sorts of things, trying to fool the eye into thinking this is reality, which can give you sleepless nights. And I will find one last little thing which I can throw in, which is from John Wick. Believe me, I have a million of these. I could talk to you all night about them. So there's a lot of violence in this. I won't dwell on this for too long. Interesting that there's this big knife fight between these guys, and they weren't allowed to throw knives, and they didn't have any glass in anything, and they had to look like they were smashing the glass. So they're all just smashing fake glass and throwing fake knives the whole time. So it's really funny when you watch this, nobody's throwing anything, but they're all pretending to be hurt. But we have to, what's called rotoscope everybody, which is create them in 3D accurately. So they cast shadows, they also cast reflections, and then they also have knives sticking out of them and blood. So there's a lot of this. So it might look like Keanu Reeves can really fight, but he's just throwing nothing. So, you know, there's a lot of that. But what's cool in this was there was this very, oh, we'll get past that one. That's gross. Get past all this. It's all gross. Here's an example. This, I'll get to a picture of it. There's this room here and there's all these skulls. And this guy who's not Keanu Reeves is being kicked in from one glass box to the next. And they didn't smash anything here. Everything you see that smashes is us creating an exact match for the glass box and all the reflections and the way the skulls are shaded, because there's one real skull in here and we had to match all of those. And then we had to have him being thrown into all these glass boxes. So we trace them in the computer in 3D and then simulate the glass, not just the glass, but also them standing on the glass, you see, kicking it around. So that's all simulated and then rendered. And some of these renderings are very complex because the glass is hard to render. And when there's lots of glass stacked, it creates long renders. And this whole environment was a building that was 3 stories tall of glass. So if there was a mistake or a person was not meant to be in there, you saw them in every piece of reflection. So we had to make lots and lots of broken glass, but then reflected everywhere throughout. This here is the set. So you can see this is on the studio floor. So we generated the outside of the building to sort of make it all match. And then what you'll notice is here is the next building across. That's what's called a translight, and it's just a big photograph of the streets. And the problem was the director didn't like the buildings, wanted the windows smaller. And so that you can see how complicated this reflection is. We had to try and replace through all that glass, different buildings. So, you know, you can sort of see we've modified the building here a bit and changed all the reflections, replaced the roof in every shot. That was going to be another glass floor, but then they changed their mind and said, just put a roof. So we had to add a digital roof into every shot. We also had to take off his finger in every shot. Here's an example of an actor being hit by one car and then an actor being hit by another car completely. And then we had to put the two together and make it look like one shot. Things like these guys on motorbikes are driving on rubber mats because they couldn't drive on the road because it was too dangerous. And we had to swap out the road for a CG road and replace a lot of the cars to make it look like wet road. So again, it's trying to fool the eye. And you'll see here that Keanu's on a horse. So again, it's CG people, replace cars, replace the road. The horse had wires all over him so that they could stop him from running off the road. Clean all that out too. And then the idea is at the end, it looks like he's really good at horse riding. A lot of those cars are not real. See, again, all CG. Smashing the glass. This is a rooftop that doesn't exist. So again, we were building New York skyline, trying to get the sunlight right. And this is an interesting one because they didn't shoot an alleyway. They shot a guy falling on a blue stage. It would have been easy to shoot an alley for real and us do a little CG guy. So it was the kind of weird way to go. But you can kind of see here, we had to make the whole back of this building and then put the little stunt guy into it. And here he is landing on the ground. So you can see here, we went into actual alleyways and we scanned, just with our iPhones and our SLRs, we scanned a whole bunch of garbage and scanned a lot of bricks and built an alley out of bits and pieces, and then tried to get the whole thing to work. Ultimately, we only kept a little bit where he actually lands, and then the rest of that is fully CG. So there you go. How are we for time? Should I stop talking, or do you want to see anything else, or do you want to ask some questions? What would you like? I can show you some more stuff.
Like you can't stop showing, we can't stop watching. So it's very, yeah, you can show some more. We have some time, I think.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I'll just show you, here you go. Well, let's have a look at this one. So this one, back when we were Allura, is Jumanji, the reboot.
Ah,
So we did a 20-minute sequence on this one, where we had this rhino attack. So these are meant to be these crazily, dangerous rhinos. So this is a rhino that we sculpted in ZBrush, which is a sculpting package. And we went to a safari park, an open zoo here where we have rhinos, and we took a lot of photographs, spent a long time studying their motion. As well as that, we have to build this helicopter that they escape in. This is what it looks like in the film. So they built a little bit for them to sit in that they shot, and then I had this real one that they shot, and the two didn't match. So this helicopter is a little bit like the one in the studio and a little bit like the one outside, and hopefully you can't see the differences. So we had to do a lot of this sort of stuff. That's all simulated, them escaping. And then you come into shots like this where they're flying downhill. There's nothing real in this. This is all CG. So you can sort of see in gray all the rocks and all the foliage that we built for a shot like this. All the actors are digital actors. We do full scans of all the actors in a cyber scan, and then we texture them and light them. And then they fall into this gorge, and it's all handmade rocks and time. This exists. There's libraries you can buy of rocks and of trees and things, but that we didn't have those then. So this is all made by us. Lots of dust simulation. Now, these little lines here, these little colored things, are the things that the animators use to animate the skeletons or the characters. So they have a very simple version of the rhinoceros, and they can use all of those things to move the hips or the tail or get the feet to plant correctly. And then again, we have muscle systems, and then you have a shot like that. So you can kind of see all the work that goes into this. So really the only thing we've kept real is just Dwayne Johnson here, and everything else is obviously us. So films like this almost become fully animated features, you use very little of the people, and you can kind of see how that all goes together. Just a lot of study. And this is what I was saying to you before about so much of what we do. Every film you learn something different, like what's interesting is they're meant to be flying this helicopter fast so that they don't get killed by these rhinos. That helicopter was moving slower than it should, and the rhinos were running 4 times faster than they should. I mean, realistically, that helicopter should have fallen out of the sky. It was moving so slow. So you have to sort of fool the audience to think that those things could actually happen.
Aber
Here's an interesting one where we have a real actor, and then you'll spot the point where he becomes CG right now. It gets a bit simple, but you sort of can see that we just matched it so that you don't.
Better for him.
Exactly. See? And these things are terrible. Birds are terrible. Their feathers are so complicated. And particularly the mechanics of folding a wing up like that and having all the feathers to tuck and fold correctly. And so you simulate them so they do, but then some stick out. And then we have to have people that hand move every feather in to make sure that it doesn't crash through the other feather. You look at that thing, a thing like this, and think, you know, it's just done on computers, but so much of it's still done by hand and by art, you know. So here's an example of us creating simple characters.
We could continue for the last of the day.
All right, I'll
Yeah.
stop. So here you go.
Yeah,
Anyway,
because
go for your life. I'll there you go. Anyway, there you go. Finish on a nice squirrel.
nice squirrel.
Make
Yeah.
a movie night tonight.
Great. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a
for
lot,
sharing
Glenn.
all
That's
these,
very impressive.
clips.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Well, I guess there will be some questions. I saw some of the questions posted in the chat already. And well, the first one, and actually, yeah, we all thinking the same, how much work in hours goes into creating one scene. I think it's quite difficult to answer this on.
Yeah, well, you know, I think sometimes, like typically a film, like our involvement in a film will take kind of 8 months, something like that, 6 to 8 months. I just finished a film for HBO, for Netflix for China, and I was working on it for 2 years. So it really varies. And the scenes, depending on how complicated they are, sometimes they're simple, sometimes they're very hard. And sometimes one shot can take the whole time just to get done, while other shots get done quickly, you know. So if you sort of think that, you know, 200 artists, 6 to 8 months is kind of right.
Yeah. With how many people? All 200?
200. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're... Yes, I was thinking about why to shoot movies at all.
Well, you know, but why do you go to see a film? You go to see the big stars, right? You wouldn't go and see Jumanji really if it didn't have those really funny comedians in those roles, or you know, you still go for the human connection, I think. But animated features are getting better and better all the time. And
if you have Keanu Reeves animated, I mean, you can record him like whatever he does, and then just put him in.
That's right. But see, for me, it's still funny that animation at the Academy Awards has its own category, but most of these films are almost animated anyway. So you know
what we know now. Yeah, that's so much. I didn't imagine that. It's really fascinating. Yeah.
How much does your background as a 2D animator handwork help you in making decisions, or knowing about how to fool people, or you know, how to take the eye to somewhere where you want it?
Well, the interesting thing is the principles of animation are the same. It's still the same lessons, even though I'm on computers now. It's still a lot of the same lessons that you learn from 2D. And you know, being the old guy in the business now, I sometimes find myself telling old stories about the old days, but sometimes the information still makes sense, you know. And the computers, people make the mistake to think that the computers do all the work. It's still very much hand done, and it's still a lot of, as I said, a lot of hours and care goes into that work.
And I can imagine it's a lot of 3D thinking of the layers of how to put up a picture, put up a frame, and the deep of the space. What I'm thinking of, like, you have to really think of what is in front, what's middle, what's in the background, what's coming up, and where to put all the things.
All the time. And also there's the space, there's the depth in the image that you're dealing with, but there's also the shot, and then the shots beside it, and the continuity, you know, because things happen through time with animation. So what happens in one shot has you know, it changes the next shot and the next shot. So, you know, you have to keep the whole thread of the story and the narrative in your mind as well, in terms of character performance and everything.
So there's some questions from the chat. I guess we should answer. Your work probably needs a lot of communication with the actors. Do you see a lot of mistakes once the movie is published?
Yes. And some actors want to really engage in computer graphics, and some people don't want to know about it. And some people can't look in the right direction, or they can't imagine what they're acting to. So we have these little toys and things to hold or things to look at, and we try to make it as, as simple for them as possible. But sometimes when they're also trying to do their own acting, they can't stop to also consider what I need later, so that they sometimes make mistakes. And then we do our best to fix those things. And also we get asked a lot to correct performances and change heads or eye directions, or things that actors do, or make them a bit younger, or they'll like the head turn from one take but the walk in another, and we put the two things together. And so there's all sorts of things that go on to make the actors look like they're acting better as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Lena is asking, or very fascinating, I'll never watch a movie the same way again. In what ways could the addition of visual effects be used in an architectural context?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been wondering that. I've been, I mean, I guess, we're sort of, I guess it comes back to the technology and how you use it, and how I guess in terms of rendering and exploring spaces and understanding. I mean, 3D's just been enormous, obviously, for you guys as well as it has been for me. It's been a complete game changer. And things like, we're trying to learn things like Unreal Engine really quickly, because you can see what they're doing now, and they're making what we do look stupid, because it's so amazing, how that tech is changing. And I guess you guys are doing the same. And I think, I guess we're all striving for the same thing too, in terms of computer graphics. It's trying to render our spaces in a more empathetic way, in a more realistic way, and in a way that people respond to, I guess, I think there's ways in which we're all heading down the same road. I don't know if that's much of an answer.
One question.
Yeah.
I was wondering how much time do you get for developing ideas? Because I think that's one of the things in architecture that clients want reality. The sooner the better. So you find less time in actually sketching and thinking and rethinking.
Yeah, the shame is that quite often we have to start being creative now. Like, it's not like they say, have a week to think about it, or quite often we get something and have to start working straight away. And the problem we find is, what they do is they have screenings. They'll say, here's a new film, nothing's ready, but do something really rough, because we need to show the studio executives, or we need to show, somebody else, or, and start testing with audiences. So we have to work really, really fast to get one version out that's very poorly made, that gets remade later. And then they change the film, and we have to do it again, and they change the film, and we have to do it again. And you never get to that point of having the time to do the one thing right, We've had times where they've said, we don't know what monster we want for this part of the film, so you invent a monster, and we'll get another company to invent a monster, and another company to invent a monster, and we'll pick the one we like the best. And you've got like a week. So you have to, there's never the time.
Yeah. Okay, we have one question from Sophie. She asked, how do you know all the movements people or object make when they collide? So how do they bounce back? Or
yeah, one word answer: YouTube.
Okay.
We do it. We go to YouTube. You find we're doing a thing now where we have two creatures that have to look like they're fighting each other and walking around, and we've just found roosters that do it, and dogs fighting, and anything you want, you can find good reference for. And we also have motion capture, where you wear the suit and you run around and record your movement in the suit, and then you can put that into the, so we do a lot of mocap for humans, but for things like horses, YouTube, and then there's things like dragons and things, and you just have to make that up. Use your imagination.
Your imagination.
Then probably one last question, like a summary of something. How closely do you work with art department, production designers, or scenographers? Is mostly done in green screen, or how close do you get together with these guys, designers?
That really comes down to the show. Sometimes you get given things that are really complete and the production designer has said, this is what I want and don't change a thing. And then sometimes they're really loose and open. Sometimes also because we're in Australia, things will be shot and designed and then we just get the designs and everything's been worked out and we never speak to anybody, but sometimes we're in the same room as them. It changes with every show. Yeah, it totally does, you know, so it's completely
depends on the people, production, everything. Yeah,
correct. And sometimes they don't hire you know, production staff. They just say to us, come up with something cool or start showing us some concept work, and that can be environmental, it can be character, it can be anything. And we'll have to, like, even holograms or on screen displays for science fiction or anything that you need, we can, you know, design that as well, and then start iterating and doing roughs in Photoshop and start working up ideas that way.
Yeah.
Now I do the master of ceremony.
You stopped the question. There are so many questions, Glenn. I don't know
We
how
could
much
go
time we have.
continue and continue and continue for the whole afternoon, I guess. So probably have to invite Glenn again, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
what I like to, there's one question I want to ask you anyway. Do you think that our real world changes because of VFX? The possibilities you can show in film, what does it do to our real world?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a head scratcher. You know, what's interesting about that is I find it interesting, and it's mostly more of a science fiction thing. And it's interesting how a lot of things in science fiction encourage people to come up with those things. You know, you sort of see that, you see something that got shown by Jules Verne or something, some visionary came up with something, and then years later somebody's trying to make it for real. I think that's probably the most important, or the biggest thing that happens. And I will say as well, I've had times where, you know, I just finished working on TED, and I went to a funeral of a family member, and my whole family, or all the guests that were there, they were very sad about it, obviously, and they all went and saw TED to make themselves feel better. And then they all came up to me and they thanked me for working on it and said, you know what, we really appreciate the work you did, because we all had a good laugh and we could all forget about it for a little while, you know. And sometimes I don't think what I do is very important, but then when that stuff happens and that changes people a little bit, you know, then that's good too. A bit left of center, probably not the answer you're after, but, you know, I find it interesting. It validates my work sometimes.
Now, I noticed that many students of mine working with existing buildings, that they think much freer on what they can do to them, or how they can change them, adapt them, you know, move them, place them somewhere else, which is actually quite nice to think this way. That's Yeah, you know, it's like that with because I'd studied graphic design before I did film, and I remember computers were just coming in, and I know the lecturers used to hate the fact that people would go to the computer first rather than sketch first, like be free with your ideas quickly and throw them out and start again and work that way. But if you go straight to the computer, they thought it was very limiting. But I think that's also because computers back then were very limiting. I think they're a lot more flexible now. So, you know, it's great that ability just to try things, you know. Yeah,
for sure.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. We have many more questions. I will collect them and see if we can answer them, or otherwise I might get back to you with one or two questions.
That's totally fine.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Well,
thank you very much
again,
for
Glenn.
inviting me.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Bye.